All right, guys. Well, I want to welcome you to our live monthly mastermind call for February of 2021. We have got a great discussion today. We're joined by Dr. Peter McGaugh. He is the Chief Technical Officer of Reyna Silver. Reyna Silver is one of my favorite silver speculations, as you guys know. We're also joined by CEO Jorge Ramiro Monroy, the CEO of Reyna Silver, and Campbell McCrary, who helped to facilitate this. He works over at Amvest Capital, and they put out some really good webinars doing in-depth interviews with a lot of the companies that we follow and other companies in the space. So we've got a great panel today, and the plan is to let Dr. McGaugh and Jorge Ramiro Monroy go through a presentation of Reyna Silver, and then we'll open it up to questions where you guys can ask your questions live, and we'll get as many answered as we can. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and get started. Dr. McGaugh, the screen is all yours, sir.
Okay, well, I think actually we're going to start with Jorge, so take it away, Jorge.
Yes. So thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you, Campbell, for organizing this. It's really a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you all, also in such an exciting time for silver. I'm sure all of you have been following what's been happening over the last few weeks. For me, obviously, as a CEO of a silver exploration company, this is very exciting, but I've been an investor, an explorer, and a student and investor in the silver space broadly for many, many years. And just really fascinated by everything that has been happening with, starting with, I think some of you might have seen the disclosure from the SLV a couple of days ago saying, they can't necessarily get their hold on physical stock. What happened with the GameStop investors trying to break the silver squeeze. And the reality is that the fundamentals of silver have been very strong for a long time now. And I'm originally from Mexico. I am a mining investor and entrepreneur. In 2017, actually largely from being able to speak with Dr. Peter McGaugh, I recognized that there was a very interesting opportunity in the silver exploration space. I had an opportunity to visit Peter at his house. You can see his house in the background with all those books behind him. I think most of them are books about Mexican geology. And I always like to say that, Peter has a very compassionate wife who allows him to have such a lush studio, but, that's been really to all of our benefits. And, in that initial conversation that I had with Peter, he explained to me something that I think is very important. He explained to me how over the last many years, silver companies have been severely underfunded, primarily because the silver prices have been low. As a result of this, for many, many years, silver companies have just barely been fighting to survive. So when you look at let's call it the mid-tier and senior silver producers, the majority of them haven't had money to explore, and they have been focusing on silver deposits that are old. If you look at the average production grade of silver in Mexico, is about 100 grams per ton. I'm sure Dr. Peter McGaugh will speak more about this topic, but very tough to make money on those kind of grades. So Peter looked at me and said, look, Jorge, if you want to be in this business, focus on high grade, focus on exploration. And I really resonated with this. So initially, I funded the company basically out of my own pocket. Was lucky to speak with Peter, and he mentioned to me that Max Silver, and actually a quick correction, Peter is not the chief exploration officer of Reyna Silver. He is a chief technical advisor of Reyna Silver. The actual, and his day job is the chief exploration officer of Max Silver. Actually, Peter, if you don't mind forwarding to the first slide, because I would maybe like to explain a little bit of what the origin of the relationship between Reyna Silver and Max Silver is. So obviously the forward-looking statement, we do encourage everybody to do your own research if you're considering investing in our company. Essentially, following my conversation that I just described with Peter, I made a proposal to Max Silver, and Max Silver had two assets that had been in their portfolio actually from their original IPO in 2003. As a matter of fact, both of those assets were district scale projects that Peter had put together in the years prior to the Max Silver IPO. And Max Silver became our shareholder. And as part of the deal, Peter McGaw is our chief technical advisor. And we are utilizing a team that Peter leads of Mexican geologists who have been working both with Peter and Max Silver and other important silver companies in Mexico over a long number of years. The philosophy of the company is focusing on high-grade silver projects that have district scale potential. We have strong institutional support. About 40% of our shares are in the hands of institutionals, and management owns 18% of the company. And we're very much aligned with investors. We're very well funded to accomplish our exploration goals. If we can go to the next slide. This is what our share structure looks like. We have 89 million shares outstanding. We have actually close to 10 million Canadian dollars of warrants that are currently in the money. We have a high liquidity, about $500,000 Canadian dollars worth of stock per day over the last 3 months. We can go to the next slide. And then we have 4 main projects. Guigui and Batopilas are the 2 projects that came from Max Silver. Guigui was actually Peter McGaw's doctoral thesis. He'll speak about it in detail in his presentation. The Bato Pilas project, also a very significant project that came from Max Silver. And then since we went public, we acquired La Reyna, which is also in Mexico, and then Medicine Springs in Nevada. If we can go to the next slide. Yes,
I'm really sorry to interrupt. Before we start, normally I check to make sure that everyone can see our screen and hear our voices correctly. It sounds like the messages I'm getting here are that people cannot see the screen. They can only see our faces. So Dr. McGaw, I think you might have to hit play on that GoToWebinar control panel. I know a lot of people use Zoom these days, so no worries if it takes you. A lot of people aren't familiar with the GoToWebinar.
What does play look like?
Actually, you know what? Okay, excellent. So
Yeah.
apparently that was just 1 or 2 people, because now all of the messages are coming in that they can see it. So I apologize. I apologize.
No worries.
Go right ahead.
So
well, we haven't got to the geology yet, so it's all right. You don't.
All right.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
So just really quickly in terms of our comparables, we have the main message here is, for those of you who are investors, perhaps more familiar with gold stocks, silver stocks are very different. Between the TSX and the ASX, there's probably 400 or 500 exploration companies looking for gold. Really, for silver exploration companies, very, very few of them. Maybe a dozen or so. Obviously, since the silver price became attractive, new ones keep popping in. But really, it's a very, very small number of companies and very small number of projects. So I think, if you have a view on silver, and I think all of us are starting to feel like this could be really a significant time for silver, not just in the short term, but over a next few years. You have to understand that these stocks are few and far between, and the quality projects are also not that many, to be honest. And really, the real driver of value in the silver exploration stocks is drilling success, when a company can show that they have the potential for high-grade silver in the context of a project that's large enough. And I think we have that with every single one of our assets. We can go to the next slide. Very briefly, we'll tell you about our key people in the company. I already introduced myself. Peter Jones is our chairman. He is the former CEO of Hudbay Minerals, which many of you might know is one of Canada's largest copper producers. And then we have René Ramirez as our exploration manager. He has been working with Peter since the 90s. He is a very competent geologist and very successful in his own right, and leading our efforts at Guigui. If we can go to the next slide. we already introduced Peter a little bit, maybe just to mention a couple of his accomplishments that he may be a little bit too shy to to talk about. But Peter really has just an incredible life story. Every time I speak to him, just the passion that he has for exploration and for silver. He came to Mexico in the early 80s as a young man, doing his doctoral thesis. He lived at the site that's now our Guigui project, and has an amazing story with Max Silver, a company that he co-founded. And the better part of the story is he took an asset that had been in the hands of Fresnillo for a long time. They sort of given up on it. It became free. He acquired it and raised money at a time where it was just post the .com crash, and it was money was hard to come by. And literally with the very first hole, hit a significant intersect that basically has made the Juanicipio deposit of Max Silver just starting commercial production. It sort of already started and in the process of going into full-scale production soon, in what's going to be the world's highest grade silver mine in production. So very significant discovery. And then we also have Doc Kerwin in an advisory board, another very accomplished geologist. He was the VP of Ivanhoe Mines until 2012, was instrumental in the discovery of the Oyu Tolgoi mine in Mongolia, which many of you might remember, one of the biggest copper and gold mines in the world. Doug was one of our early investors and part of our advisory board. So with that, I'll now like Peter to walk us through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, well, so it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Steve and Campbell, for organizing this, and Jorge for putting all this together so we can have some fun doing exploration. There's a couple of little things I'd like to correct as I get started here. First of all, I'm still young. Second of all, you should not come away with the impression that we are going to hit, that any exploration company is ever likely to hit something on their first hole. So be realistic on that schedule. And yes, Juanicipio will be the world's highest grade silver mine, but it will also be the world's biggest silver mine. So it will be producing somewhere in the high teens to low 20s of millions of ounces by the time it's in full production. So that feeds into the whole thing that Jorge mentioned a couple of times, which is high grade and district scale. And you really want the combination of the both. And what do those do for you? And it's really all about margin. So it's not just a question of how much money you make, whether you make money. It's a question of how much money you make. And if you go for things that make money when silver is at its bottom of the market and is large enough to survive several market cycles, then you're sleeping at night when things are bad. And when things are better than the worst they can be, you can party all night if that's what you want to do with the money that you've made off the company you've invested in. So that's how that works. And that is the fundamental basis of everything we're looking for. So we're not looking to put a small mine back into production. We're not looking to find a small or a medium scale mine. We're looking to find a major important mine that has decades of potential for production. So these aren't necessarily easy to find, but in the long run, it's just as much trouble to put a really big mine into production as a really small mine. So you might as well keep your powder dry and go for the big one. So having said that, let's move into Guigui, which is at the heart of Mexico's largest carbonate replacement system. And I'm a geologist. We invent all kinds of fancy words for the kinds of deposits that we're looking for, which reflect to some extent how they form. In this particular case, all the deposits we look for that have silver are what we call hydrothermal deposits. And that just means that the silver came in hot water. That's what it boils down to. In the case of the carbonate replacement systems, that hot water reacts with limestone. So that's what they make cement out of. It's like dropping vinegar into baking soda. It is a neutralization reaction, an acid and a base. Hot water with metals, limestone that's not got any, dissolves a little limestone, dumps out the metals in place. And these are the backbone of the Mexican underground silver and base metal producers. Silver almost never travels alone, so it's almost always combined with lead, zinc, gold, stuff like that. Gold and copper travel by themselves. Silver almost never travels by itself. And just to back up a little bit, keep in mind that Mexico has produced 25% of all the silver mined in human history. That's from time immemorial. And it continues to be the world's biggest silver producer. But not only is Mexico where you want to be for silver, but worldwide there are 15 districts that have produced over 1 billion ounces of silver. 8 of them are in Mexico. So Mexico is where you want to be for silver, period, and where you want to be for big silver. So that's an important fundamental of why you want to be there. The Santa Eulalia district, which is where Guigui is a historic producer, 300 plus years of continuous production, has produced over 500 million ounces of silver at a grade of 10 ounces per ton. It's produced almost 8 million metric tons of lead and zinc. That's a lot of lead and zinc. That's at a combined 15% lead and zinc kind of grade. So what that means is with 15% lead and zinc, you're probably covering all of your operating costs with those fellow travelers, the lead and zinc that come along for the ride, whether you want them or not, and the silver's free. And that's what high grade and margin does for you. So where are we looking and why are we looking here? When we look at Santa Eulalia and similar districts worldwide, what we recognized is that half of this system is missing. We haven't found the heat engine, the magma body that was placed into the Earth's crust that drove this system. And everything tells us if this is the biggest carbonate replacement system in Mexico, and we've only found half of it, the other half of the system has the potential to be equally important. So here in this upper portion where all these names are and all the claims are, this is where the historic production came from. Everything says the source is back in this direction, and so this is where we are looking for more. And everything you see in yellow is the property package that we have, and that's about 4,500 hectares. So if you're not metricated yet, multiply by 2.2 to get to acre. So here's that model I was talking. This intrusive body comes up into the Earth's crust, is placed in a limestone section shown in blue, develops what's called skarn around it. Skarn is just high temperature alteration because of the heat coming off that intrusion. There's some dikes and structures that come away from it, and the fluids move along those structures, forming skarn and then depositing the high-grade lead, zinc, silver sulfides that we care about is what are called mantos, which are like flat ribbons of mineralization, more or less parallel to the beds in the limestone. They're like linguini in terms of their overall morphology. And then you have what we call chimneys, which are big vertical pipes. These form at structural intersections, and so they form big freestanding bodies of sulfides. So at Santa Eulalia, they found the district in outcrop in 1703 and essentially mined through the mantos, down the chimneys, into the deep mantos, into the fringes of the skarn zone when basically they reached what is now the property boundary for Guigui. So half of the system sits out here. This is the piece of the system we're looking for. When we were working here for MAG, we did some drilling, not very much actually in the particular area we're drilling now. A lot of sophisticated geophysics, a lot of mapping, satellite imagery, all of this stuff, which we have now put into the exploration program for Reyna, looking for basically picking up where mag left off. People ask, why did mag leave off? Mag left off because mag found what is about to become the world's biggest silver mine, and that's what mag is focused on. So when we put that model into the context of the Santa Eulalia district, off here to the left, this is the Chimney and Monto portion of the system, mined to depth, following this intrusive rock to the south. There's the property boundary. And so what we're doing is trying to explore through volcanic rocks, which are not reactive to the style of mineralization that we're looking for. They're pre-mineral, so they're altered. So what we have to do is look through those volcanic rocks that were there at the time of mineralization and got altered by the exhaust from this mineralization. But we're trying to look through that and drill to depth to find the center of this system. So here's an example of some of the geophysics that was flown by mag. And for those of you who aren't familiar with geophysics, the basic idea is that the Earth's crust has variability in it. The rock layering is different. It's cut by faults, it's cut by intrusions, and all of these different aspects of geology affect or influence various kinds of electromagnetic signals. So, magnetism, electricity, all of these things are affected by the rocks. And when you run one of these surveys and you process it, you see things like this big red thing over here, which is a volcanic center related to a big volcano that we know sat down here at the time of mineralization. But you also see these linear features, and these reflect structures that are not visible on the surface but are detected by this technique, and they're down in the subsurface. And so when we flew this with mag, we could see these beautiful linear structures that are parallel to some of the structures that we see in the historic part of the district, but they're covered with a carpet of this younger altered volcanic rocks. And so we're trying to see through that. And once again, that circle of where we're focusing is in this area right in here. So we're currently reinterpreting all of these data. Now, we've put everything together, and this is the drilling program that is actually going on right now. So here's the historic mines. The yellow is the property we have. This is the location of our first 3 drill holes. So we set up here, drilled in this direction, set up here, drilled in this direction, and now we're set up here, drilling essentially in this direction. Now, we can't talk about the results because we don't talk a hole at a time. We set up a program, we drill the program, and then we'll talk about it. But you can see historically there are only 4 holes in this area where we're most interested now. These are a long way away from our target, and they actually helped determine the fact that the target, this is too far. So what we're looking for is somewhere between the historic part of the district and somewhere north of these holes. So that's part of why we're focusing in this area. That is what the rig looks like out there drilling away in the field. And this gets a little more granular in terms of the targeting. So the map up here on the left, these blue lines are faults that we can see on the surface. They're structures that make sense. They actually coincide with some of these directions that we can see in the geophysics. And we can map and sample these, and they have geochemical signatures on them. And that just means that ore fluids or spent ore fluids, exhaust from the system, moved along those fractures. They deposited something that we can sample on the surface, and they tell us which of these structures saw more fluid and have more metals in them. So that's very important in terms of surface mapping. In this area right in here, you see a number of blue, green, and yellow lines. And green lines. These are results from a satellite mapping program. We can actually map individual alteration minerals from outer space. And we know certain minerals reflect higher temperatures and different chemical conditions. So when you have a place where 4 or 5 different high temperature or related alteration species show up, that's a place you want to pay attention. So we've got one up here, we've got another one down here. Again, those holes that cut things off are way off the screen here, so that's not an issue. And then here's the same thing dropped onto a different form of the geophysics. So you can see this northeast structural pattern and this north-south structural pattern. And that's all part and parcel of how we've defined these drill holes. Our goal here in the first program is not necessarily to find mineralization, we'll obviously be happy to do that, but is to find that intrusion that is driving the system. Once we can pin that down, then we can start working around it to figure out where the... So that's the story for Guigui in the Santa Eulalia district. Moving to Bato Pilas, this is out in Sierra Madre, so think Treasure of the Sierra Madre kind of country, except there's a paved road that goes all the way into the district now. This is the highest grade silver district ever in Mexico. From 1882 to 1913, the district produced ores that were essentially masses of native silver. Think a Brillo pad of crystallized native silver that ran better than 2% silver. The district historically has produced more than 300 million ounces of silver from ores of exactly that kind of character. So these are big inclined bodies. They're not very wide. They don't have to be very big because they are so ridiculously high grade. So what we did was consolidate the district. These claims here that show up as uncolored, we're not interested in because they're like underneath the town and you can't mine under the town even if you find something. And this one has been mined essentially wall to wall. Most of the district production was in the Spanish era from about 1660 until early 1800s, and from surface working. So people went out on the surface, they found these high-grade veins, they followed them to depth, and that's what they produced. Mag came in, and actually in the late 1800s, they came in down at river level and tried to drive a tunnel under all of these veins. And I'll show you that in the next slide. They didn't get to all of them before the Mexican Revolution, and Pancho Villa chased them out of town. But with Mag, we came in with the idea that those ore bodies of crystallized native silver ought to show up very nicely to certain kinds of modern geophysical techniques. And we combined that with some detailed surface mapping and started to drill. In fact, in 2005, we hit a narrow zone, 20 centimeters of brecciated vein that ran 19 kilograms per ton. So that's 614 ounces of silver over 20 centimeters. You could dilute that to 2 meters and still wind up with an extremely respectable grade. You'd still have 60 ounces of silver per ton diluting 20 centimeters to 2 meters. So the targets here aren't necessarily big, but they're ridiculously high grade when you find them. So here's a little bit of an idea. I mean, this is 1 month's production in 1906, more than 350,000 ounces of silver, again, from those very, very high grade ores. That production I mentioned, lots of different veins in the camp, and there's no evidence for zoning. They mined these things from the surface to a vertical distance of over 700 meters, and the mineralization style didn't change. And the reason they stopped mining to depth was because Pancho Villa's guys smashed the hydroelectric plant that was running the pumps that kept the mines pumped out. So there is potential at depth, but there's a lot of potential left around this district because, as I mentioned, that tunnel that they drove is covered by this claim that you can see right here. And there's the tunnel shown in green. That's how far they got. But all of these other red lines that you see all over the place, these are veins that were mined from the surface down for maybe 50 or 100 meters. And this tunnel was supposed to come in 300 meters below the surface. These never got touched. So a lot of the work we're doing now is along the projection of these structures to the north of the tunnel and around these structures to the north of this area where the tunnel never got. This group of claims right here, of veins right here, essentially mined wall to wall. This is actually misplaced. This is entirely within this claim, but there is potential along strike for veins here too. So lots to work with here. Some of MAG's other holes, 1.7 meters of 2.5 kilograms silver, a meter of 3,000 grams. There's lots to work with out here, and we expect, as we're moving the program forward now, first quarter, I think first quarter 2020 is not going to happen thanks to COVID-19, but we expect to be drilling here later in the year as the Mexican government gets back up and operating and we can actually get permits through the permitting department. Moving on to La Reyna. This is a small claim we've picked up in a larger district. It's got 4 kilometers of strike length. It's produced some pretty nice grades historically out of this structure. A few little shallow drill holes in it, surrounded by Sierra metals and their Cusi mining area. So our goal here is to track this vein out along the 4 kilometer strike length, see if we can prove something up, and work with Sierra Metals to bring this forward. Worth pointing out that it is only a 2-hour drive from Chihuahua City and Guigui to the Cusi property, which we call Cusi because that's a lot easier to say than Cusi, which is a Nahuatl or Raramuri Indian name from that part of the world. Strong indications that the vein continues to depth. Lots of surface assays over 200 grams silver, several over 1 kilogram, maximum of 5 kilograms. The old drill holes in this thing are less than 100 meters from the surface. So very early days on this project, but some good potential for some high-grade mineralization. The last project I'll talk about is the Medicine Springs project in northern Nevada. It's only about an hour's drive from Elko, which of course is the big gold mining center. And Medicine Springs actually sits on a northwest trending regional structural zone called the Carlin Trend, which is actually very famous for producing a lot of major gold deposits. We got this property from a group of geologists who call themselves Northern Lights Resources. They'd been involved in exploring this project in the 80s and 90s, people looking for shallow, low-grade, open-pittable silver. And if you know anything about silver, low-grade, open-pit silver is death. One, maybe 2 examples of those that actually worked can be pointed out to. And again, that goes back to the fact that silver doesn't travel by itself. It goes with lead and zinc, and those mess up the metallurgical recovery of the silver. So we're looking at all this work that was done historically to prove up this shallow, low-grade resource. We're looking at that as leakage from a larger, more coherent, higher grade system at depth. So we've got a good address on a regional structure. They've hit some high grades historically, but they're up in a unfavorable, irregular part of the stratigraphy, and we know that at depth there are more coherent, better host rocks. This is a CRD, so this is like Santa Eulalia in the sense of the style of deposit type that it is. Lots of analyses over 400 grams silver. That's what I like to see as sort of a minimum silver grade in early stages in my exploration program. And the work that was done before was all done with reverse circulation drilling, which is sort of like trying to understand a piece of wood that you've put a drill hole through by understanding the sawdust. And that just, that doesn't work. This property needs diamond drilling, and that's the direction we're headed. Lots of potential here for more. I gotta move this to the other side because I can't see my screen when I have that over there. I can't see what I'm talking about. So here's part of the property that has had most of the work done historically. A lot of drilling in this area of chasing that low-grade resource that I talked about. But we've got lots of samples with good silver grades, a number of them exceeding 100, maximum value 560 grams. We've got a big soil anomaly, and because there's not good outcrop for a lot of the property, you sample the soils, you run it through a geochemical process, and it gives you very low level detection, so you can determine large scale zones of different elements that are related to the silver mineralization. There's no drilling historically down in this area, which is actually where you see a lot of the best grades. And when we went out to do our initial recon, the first thing that we discovered was that folks had thought that the high temperature source of the system was up here. We found the kind of high temperature alteration that we're looking for in Santa Eulalia on some of the mine dumps in this part of the district. So maybe the folks who were working here before had it backwards. Plus, we recognized that the alteration is much more extensive than had previously been recognized. So we've added very substantially to the property position. We think there's a lot bigger system here than has previously been suspected. So when you put all of that together, Reyna's exploration program has a number of catalysts. So we've got our drilling program going on right now at Guigui. It's a 10,000 meter program. We started in the last quarter of last year. We're on the third hole now. We probably wouldn't be on the third hole except we lost the second hole in a big structure, which is a Hollywood problem. You don't like to lose a hole, period, but if you're going to lose it, you want to lose it in a structure that's got some indications of what you're looking for. At Bato Pilas, we're developing drill targets. We put out some numbers from our surface-based channel and chip sampling program, which is based on reinterpretation of MAGS data plus new satellite imagery. The same kind of things we did at Guigui, we've done at Bato Pilas, and we're seeing, actually what we're finding out there is ancient prospecting done by the Spaniards that is on the same trends that were mined up to 1913, but well beyond where they were mined, and we're actually finding native silver in some of the surface samples. And this is in outcrop. This is not soil. This is native silver in outcrop. At Reyna, we're beginning a surface and sampling and mapping program. We hope to have that ready by second half of this year rather than second quarter of this year. And at Medicine Springs, we're grappling with the reality that the system is bigger than we thought. We've picked up more ground. We're going to do some airborne surveys out there. We are currently permitted to do 5,000 meters of drilling. So we can come in underneath those underneath the old place where folks spend a lot of time and money trying to drill off a shallow resource. We can come in under that. We don't want to drill that until we're pretty sure that's really the center of the system and not just a distal part or a remote part of the system. So our goal there really is to tighten things up and drill maybe a couple of holes in there, but get permitted to drill some holes elsewhere on the property. And I guess this is my outro here. We have high quality assets focused on district scale, high grade, especially at Guigui and Bato Pilas. Got a great team. These are guys who have been working together for 25 years, and we've made discoveries all around the world, and we've got a very strong balance sheet so we can do the kind of meaningful exploration program that needs to be done across all of these projects without having to go back to the well on a regular basis. And that's all thanks to Jorge's doing a very disciplined job of raising the financing and keeping control over our share structure. For more information, you can go to www.reynasilver.com or you can email Jorge directly at reynasilver.com. Address is right there, and this presentation is on the Reyna Silver website, so you can get more information there if you want it.
Fantastic. What a great presentation. I want to thank both of you for your time. If it's okay with you guys, we've got some questions in the question box that we can just fire away if that works for you guys.
Sure.
All right, sounds
Yes.
good. And excellent. And I'll just mention to the members, as you guys know, My sweet spot, I tend to only invest primarily in mid-tiers and nearer-term producers. So it takes a pretty compelling story to draw me towards an early-stage exploration company. And Reyna is one of the very few that met all of those criteria for me personally, as a higher risk speculation. But I think it's certainly a worthy one to consider, as you guys know. So if it's okay with you guys, I'll just go ahead and fire some questions away, and I'll just read them as is rather than try and reinterpret them. And Mike actually emailed in, and he's got 4 questions here. They're really good questions. He says that the company seems to be well funded, but the cash burn rate is always something to look at. Does the company see its cash burn rate rising materially as more drilling is added? And at what point would they see where they might need to add new capital injections as dilution?
So let me take that question.
Sure.
So I just had a meeting with our board last week on this regard. Essentially, we're more than funded for the program we described to you today. But it is true that as we continue to drill, we will eventually deplete our cash position. I think the mandate I have from the board is always to have a cushion. Now, if you look at our capital structure and that slide that I showed you at the beginning, as I mentioned, we do have about more than 10 million Canadian in warrants. Amazingly, all of it is in the money, and it has been actually for quite a few months since we went public. For those of you who are familiar with Canadian stocks, oftentimes, when warrants are on the money, people just exercise them right away. The fact that people haven't exercised them in large amounts speaks to the fact that people believe in the company, want to see results. It speaks to the fact that we have institutions and high net worth individuals that are, going to see our believe in our company, are going to see our projects through. But there is a built-in mechanism of warrants there. As a matter of fact, it's been an interesting process since we went public in June 2020. Almost every week we get a number of warrants exercised. So our cash position has remained almost the same since we went public. Of course, in the last couple of months, we started drilling with more intensity. So those costs do go up. But we basically have, with the money that has come in from warrants, our cash position is almost intact from the beginning. And we do have an exploration plan that we can everything that Peter described to you. We have more than enough. I think it still leaves us off the top of my head something like 3-4 million Canadian left in the bank. But keep in mind, it'd be a fluid exercise as drills campaigns get completed. Our share price, depending on what our share price does, we'll see how we keep the company with enough budget for the next stage of drilling. But at the moment, it's just too early. And the one thing that I will point out, we really have an exceptional cash position in terms of accomplishing the goals that we want to accomplish. I do think that the amount of drilling that we'll do will be quite significant. We're adding value on the ground, and we don't have a huge presence, for instance, with corporate expenditures in Canada. We don't have an office in Canada or in basically anywhere else. In fact, the company doesn't have a physical office. We all work out of our own spaces, and the money is just going to adding value to the company on the ground.
Fantastic. And I'll bunch these 3 questions into one, so I'll just read them all because they all relate to MAG. So it says, he asks, Reyna is operating on ground released by MAG Silver. Is there any particular reason why MAG did not keep this property for themselves? Second, is Reyna looking to follow MAG's playbook and bring this potential property all the way to the producer stage? And then 3, how much support, if any, is MAG going to give the company?
Yeah, great. So, the reason that, and it's a great question, and as you can imagine, I get this question all the time. Sure. When I reached to MAG Silver to see if these properties were available, they were not looking to sell them. They really weren't shopping them around. I reached out to them, and MAG Silver was still a long way. Since we took these properties in 2018, MAG Silver has raised, I think, roughly $100 million to be fully financed to production. So at the time when we took these assets, really MAG Silver was completely focused on taking their asset to production, and the board had given a directive to stay completely focused on that. That created this opportunity. They they were happy to give it to us because they kept the upside through their equity participation in Reyna Silver, and I think they're happy with the way that it has turned out so far, and they're our largest shareholder at the moment. The second question was what was it, whether they're giving us any support.
Yeah, just how much support, if any, is MAG giving the company?
Yeah, so look, they've been very good to us. Obviously, the biggest support is for them to allow us to have Peter as part of our advisory board, and especially over the process of going public, they really were instrumental in basically supporting specifically me in the process. We did it at a time where it was a really tough market. So but other than that, they don't have any specific inference in the company's operations. And there was another question that I think if you don't mind repeating it.
Oh, no problem at all. I think you actually answered all three of them.
Did I? Okay, great.
Yeah, and I'll mention, just looking at your corporate presentation, it looks like MAG is a large shareholder as well, with 13%.
That's correct. They're our largest shareholder, own roughly 10% of the company.
Okay, excellent.
It's probably also worth pointing out that Jorge's being a little modest here. That Jorge developed a relationship with MAG over a number of years prior to all of this happening. So it wasn't just Jorge walked into the office and said, "I want these properties." We had worked with Jorge marketing for a number of years in Tokyo and Beijing and Hong Kong and places that he's connected with in the Orient. So we had a good track record, a good feeling. We enjoyed working with him. So when he made this proposal to MAG, we had enough history with him that it was a very comfortable thing to do.
Excellent. And I'll interject my own question here. As I like to invest primarily in silver miners, but it can be hard to diversify jurisdictionally outside of Mexico. I mean, there are some other projects, but primarily they're in Mexico. Are you concerned at all about jurisdictional risk in Mexico? It seems like it's still a very mining friendly jurisdiction, but perhaps the trend is going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I'll give my 2 cents and then let Peter answer. I'm actually from Mexico, and I've been obviously very familiar with the jurisdiction, but not anywhere as much as Peter. But it is definitely changing. But overall, it's still an amazing jurisdiction for mining. There's a lot of things that you just cannot replicate in Canada. The infrastructure, the kinds of deposits and projects that are available. The exploration potential is very significant. The main challenge in Mexico is around security, as everybody knows. And the one thing I'll say is we are especially our main project Guigui is, if you look at at the map of where it's located, it's literally 15 minutes away from the airport in Chihuahua City. It's an international city. It's in a mining community. It's very safe. The security issues are worse really when they are in more remote locations. But even then, Canadian companies continue to thrive and be successful. To this day, it is one of the sort of things that you have to deal with security. But it's the way I like to describe it is it's a toss-up between in Canada you're terrorized by the government with over-regulation. Same in the U.S. It's a different kind of
Sure.
problem to have. And the volume of Canadian explorers and American explorers exploring in Mexico is so large. I think it's an attestment of they're there for a reason. and it's not decreasing the amount of explorers. It's actually increasing dramatically. The amount of drilling in Mexico over the last few months is really, I wouldn't say unprecedented, but certainly just incredibly large compared to what we had over the last decade. So, and I don't know, Peter may have a bit of a different and perhaps more insightful comment than mine.
No, I think you put it pretty nicely in a nutshell. I would point out that Chihuahua is one of the safest states in Mexico. And yeah, I think actually it's pretty close to unprecedented, the amount of drilling that's going on. I mean, I've lived through several cycles, exploration cycles in Mexico, and I think you could look at drilling in terms of its increase in the same kind of way that people looking at the increase in the price of silver. And I don't think those are isolated from each other. I think that the increased interest in silver, the increase in the silver price is directly reflected in how much drilling is going on, because people recognize as Mexico is where you go for silver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Steven, maybe I'll add another point that I think it's important to mention, which is, I think, that risk that in Mexico, we also been very careful in finding a number of ways to mitigate that within the company structure. We do have a board member, well, in addition to myself, who's a Mexican lawyer, who has very good knowledge and also a lot of connections in government in Mexico. We do have shareholders in our company that are Mexican, who also have been giving us great advice and have great relationships with the government. And then we, Peter and his team have long-standing relationships in the areas where we do exploration, and that's actually also incredibly useful. We're in the process of developing an ESG policy for the company, and ESG has become such an important part of doing mining. For myself, I'm as you know, I'm from Mexico. I spend a lot of time trying to understand what makes for a successful company, how to deal with community and government relations. I think it's time for the mining industry in general to really step to the plate, and I think ESG is sort of starting to emerge as an important qualification for companies, but I think in a few years' time it'll be a must for investors. So I think that's something we're very interested in. One surprise about Peter's corporate culture in the team of geologists that he has is that they seem to have that very much in their blood. In addition to being good geologists, they have amazing tact and amazing values as to dealing with the community, with the vendors, contractors. So I have to say that I'm very pleased with what we have so far, and that's something that mitigates the jurisdictional risk tremendously.
Absolutely. Michael asks, I think this is for Dr. McGaw. He says, did I hear? Oh, actually, no. He says, did I hear Jorge earlier say that you'd mapped 200 ! New veins at Bato Pilas?
No, I think I have to say I didn't say 200. Two.
Okay. Two. Okay. Yeah.
Two new veins.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And by the way, Jorge, I see the books in your background, and it's.
Oh yeah.
I heard you mention before the SLV problems and everything. It's kind of rare, from my perspective, to see CEOs and chief geologists who are also familiar with maybe the manipulation and kind of the shenanigans that go on in the silver market and the outsized potential. So that's just encouraging to see too as well.
Yeah, I mean that's really separate. I will just do a caveat, because I think as executive of a mining company, you really have to block the noise of silver prices and silver market. That's really just more of a personal interest. Mm-hmm. And I think obviously it helps in certain ways, but I think Peter always likes to say, focus on higher grades so that you can make money under any market conditions. So that's very much the philosophy of the company. And if silver goes to 50 or 100, even better. Mm-hmm. I actually thought you were talking about a different book, which is the Silver the Silver Magnet, which is a book that's you see in the back in my shelf, mm-hmm. and it's a book about Bato Pilas, and really just an amazing read. If any of your readers wants a copy, we do have a few, and we're ordering a few more. And if you send me an email at info@Reyna Silver, I'd be happy to get you a copy. I don't know how many people are in the listening, so if I get hundreds of emails, I might not be able to get one to
Well, this will go out to
everyone.
almost 5,000 people, but
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think everyone's gonna.
So, but please do send me a message, and I'll do my best to get a copy to you.
And a lot of people have mentioned they've read it and they really enjoyed that book.
Great.
All right, I'm going to go to a couple more questions here. Robert asks, Dr. McGaw, could you elaborate on what you said earlier about the second hole being lost in the structure at Guigui?
Right. So when you're drilling holes, especially in limestones, sometimes you run into caves, sometimes you run into open fractures, and you can't always bridge those structures with the drill rods. In other words, the drillers tell you, if we keep going, we'll get stuck. And then you're buying a drill string, and that's expensive. So at that point, you basically say, okay, I'm going to shut this hole down and I'm going to move to my next hole. But you get the information that tells you that's the same structure that we cut across in the previous hole, and maybe we can see features in the rocks around the structure before we got there. But tell us, where do we put the next hole? Do we go to the left? Do we go to the right? Do we go down? What do we do? And so we got that information from the hole, and we've offset, and we're going to the next place. But we cut it at an oblique angle. It was an open space along the structure. They ran 40 meters of rods into the hole before they realized we're not getting through this anytime soon. So it was just an aspect of the geology that tells you back off and try again.
Excellent. So I'm seeing we're probably not going to get to all these questions. If you guys have the time, we'll do two more.
Yes.
Stephen asks, are there any other minerals of financial interest other than lead and zinc mentioned?
At Guigui, yes. In fact, that's actually an excellent question, because the big carbonate replacement systems tend to be zoned over multiple kilometers, and so they have a metal assemblage, which is silver, lead, zinc, copper, and gold, and that tends to be zoned from one end of the system to the other. And if you look at the historic parts of the mining district, in the deepest parts, before it ran into the Guigui property boundary, or the boundary that they didn't mine across, they were starting to see better than a gram of gold, and they were starting to see 0.1 copper. So we expect, and the model tells us this from other deposits of the type around the world, that as we get closer to that intrusion, we'll still have the silver, lead, and zinc, but we will pick up, with luck, appreciable amounts of copper and gold, which will come along for the ride. And the Cetiolalia system is also known for having a certain amount of indium in it, which is valuable in its own right. It tends to follow the zinc, so you recover that from your zinc concentrate. So there are some possibilities for additional, much lower elemental concentrations, but nonetheless make the concentrates attractive to certain smelters around the world.
All right, excellent. And last question, Phil asks, how many projects can Reyna effectively explore with existing capitalization?
Yeah, so maybe I can answer that question. We have enough money to do the first pass in all our projects. The way that I'm looking at it from a business point of view is, oftentimes that first initial pass of the project, it tends to be not extremely expensive and where you add the most value. It's also caters to Peter McGaw's and his team's skill set. And it does get a point to where you really have to choose one to focus on. When we went public, our intention was to just focus on the Guigui project, but with the silver market exploding, having a healthy market cap, a healthy cash position, the board decided that it was prudent to advance all of our projects, at least to the point where we can drill. And then there's always a possibility of JVing some of our assets to another company to spin them to create value for shareholders. Other than Guigui, we're focused on doing ourselves. To all our other projects, I have taken myself and my team the task to introduce them to some of the other silver sort of mid-tiers and larger companies to see if there's any possibility of doing JVs. But I'll tell you one thing, Stephen, the way the we're doing now is because the silver market is so strong at the moment. I do feel this is the right way to the right approach to give us essentially to give equity shareholders of Reyna Silver maximum exposure to silver prices. And of course, there's a natural. I think Peter started his presentation talking about the risk in mining, and having a portfolio of assets also addresses and the specific risk in exploration. So we're very pleased. We'll see how we go. We'll see how the market develops. But at the moment, as I mentioned, we do have the capacity, the manpower, and the funds to do this first round of exploration.
Excellent. Well, the feedback here has been fantastic. A lot of people are saying they really enjoyed it. They're asking for replays, which there will be. The replays will be sent out this evening. So I want to thank both of you gentlemen sincerely for taking time out of your busy schedules to come spend some time with us, talk about Reyna. It's obviously a very exciting exploration company that we track. And thank you guys both so much for coming to speak with us.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Stephen and Campbell.
Always a pleasure, Terence, and always fun to talk about the green metal. And that's something people forget, is that silver, as I think Steve mentioned earlier, silver is what makes all of this alternate technology work. It's what makes electric cars work. The demand side of this equation, I think, has nowhere to go but up over the near future.
Absolutely. And I also want to thank Campbell and also one of our members, Guna Krishnan, who helped facilitate this this discussion today. So thank you all. Thank you to all the members, and we'll be in touch throughout the week. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Take care.